Hello everyone. I'm very happy to welcome you back to my channel. In the previous episode, looking back at everything that had happened, it seemed like things were gradually returning to a familiar stability. No more major disruptions. No more situations that turned life upside down. Hoai and Tieu San. Both were settling into a calmer rhythm. Slower, clearer, and more peaceful. Days passed, without too many worries, without sudden changes. Just simple, everyday moments. Yet enough to feel that everything was moving in the right direction. But perhaps it is exactly during those moments of peace when people begin to grow used to stability, begin to feel secure, that unexpected things quietly begin to appear. Not loudly, not clearly, not in any concrete form, but enough to make one unable to ignore. This time, the story does not begin with a clear event. No sudden incident. No moment that turns everything upside down. But begins with a feeling difficult to name. Not exactly fear. Not clearly worry. But a sense of unease. Quietly creeping into every thought. A feeling that someone was watching, not making any sound, leaving no obvious trace, not appearing directly, but enough to make her unable to ignore it. That morning, everything still began as usual. Nothing different. No warning signs. Tieu San took Ivy outside. Her familiar routines, repeated as always. Going to the market, choosing what was needed, buying familiar things. Nothing unusual. Nothing different from previous days. After that, she stopped by a small cafe. A familiar place. A simple stop. Not noisy. Not crowded. Everything unfolded in a very ordinary way. No detail stood out. No moment changed the atmosphere. But there was one thing. Very small. Very vague. That began to appear. From the moment she left the house, Tieu San had a feeling. Unclear. Hard to define. But very real. As if someone was watching her. A gaze. Invisible. Impossible to locate. Yet enough to make her not entirely at ease. At first, she reassured herself. Maybe she was overthinking. Maybe it was just a fleeting feeling. A moment of sensitivity. With no basis. No reason. She kept walking, maintaining her rhythm. No change. No pause. But that feeling did not disappear. Did not fade. It remained. Quietly. Following her every step. Until, after walking a while, everything around still looked normal. Nothing seemed different. But in one moment, she noticed a man standing in the distance. Not too close. Not enough to immediately draw attention. But positioned. Just enough to see clearly. And what caught her attention was not his presence, but his gaze. Fixed on her and Ivy. Tieu San did not stop. Did not turn back for long. Did not show obvious awareness. She simply observed. Calmly, she continued walking, as if nothing had happened, as if she noticed nothing. But in her mind, every detail was being recorded. Once could be coincidence, twice could be chance, but when it repeated, it was no longer simple. That man did not approach, did not speak, did not act directly, just stood at a certain distance, close enough to watch, far enough to avoid attention. His gaze remained unchanged, not avoiding, not fully hiding, yet not obvious either. A presence, both clear and unclear. And then, after a short time, he left. No trace, no glance back, no further action. Simply disappeared, as if he had never been there. But the feeling did not disappear with him. In the days that followed, Tieu San became more aware, no longer seeing it as a fleeting feeling, no longer thinking it was coincidence, but began observing more clearly, more actively, the places she went, the familiar roads, the times of day. Everything was remembered, to check, to confirm. And then, that man appeared again. Not every day, not always clearly, but enough to realize this was no longer coincidence, no longer chance, but intention, a presence, repeated, with distance, with calculation, not crossing the line, yet never fully disappearing. Tieu San still did not tell hi. Not because she didn't trust him. Not because she wanted to hide. But because she had nothing concrete to define what was happening. Nothing clear to explain. Just a feeling. A series of appearances. Impossible to prove, yet impossible to deny. She did not want to make him worry. Did not want to add pressure. For something still without a clear form. But deep inside, a sense of caution had begun to grow. Quietly. Unseen. Yet always there. In every glance. In every step. In every moment. When she no longer felt completely at ease, as before. One afternoon, when the light had begun to soften. No longer the harsh sun of midday. No longer the rush of peak hours. But a quieter time. Slower. And somewhat more peaceful. Tieu San held Ivy in her arms. Walking along the familiar path. A path she had taken countless times. To the point where she no longer needed to think. No longer needed to pay attention. Everything around her had become so familiar that it was almost instinctive. But within that familiarity, something unfamiliar appeared. That man was there again. No longer at a distance like before. No longer just a faint figure, passing briefly through her sight. This time, he stood closer, clearer. His gaze, no longer just a fleeting glance, no longer distant observation, but a look, direct, clear, and unavoidant. Tieu San stopped, no longer continuing as before. No longer choosing silence. No longer observing from afar, but deciding to face him. She turned, not hurried, but firm. Her eyes met his, without avoidance, without hesitation. A calm surface, but inside, a clear sense of alertness. "Sir, do you need something?" Her voice was not loud, not harsh, but clear. Clear enough to show she would no longer remain silent. The man paused, just for a brief moment, but enough to reveal he hadn't expected her to ask so directly. His eyes showed a trace of confusion, not fear, not avoidance, but surprise. He didn't answer immediately, didn't rush to speak. Andre just cautious, but observant, deeper, more focused. A strange feeling appeared, unclear, yet impossible to ignore. "You know hi?" Her voice slowed, no longer sharp, but careful. The man nodded, not quickly, not rushed, but certain. Yes. One word, but heavy, impossible to dismiss. "Who are you?" This question was no longer probing, but a demand, a seriousness, a need for clarity. The man fell silent, not just for a few seconds, but longer, as if thinking, as if weighing, as if asking himself whether to speak or keep it hidden. His eyes did not leave Tieu San, yet were not entirely steady. A struggle, clearly visible. And then, after everything, he spoke softly, very quietly, but clearly. "I am Hai's father." At that moment, everything seemed to stop. No sound, no movement, no immediate reaction. Tieu San said nothing, didn't gasp, didn't step back, just stood there, looking at him. A gaze, not fully believing, yet unable to deny. Because, in his eyes, there was something very real. Not a lie, not a story made up, but something that had existed for a long time, hidden. "Are you telling the truth?" Her voice, lower now, no longer firm, but cautious, seeking confirmation. The man nodded. No further explanation. No long words. No justification. Just acceptance. Tieu San looked down at Ivy, at the child in her arms, then back at him. Her thoughts began to tangle, without order, without direction, just fragments that could not yet connect. If this was true, then it meant Hai did not know, had never known. And if Hai didn't know, then everything would no longer be simple, no longer a small matter, but something that could change so many things. The man spoke again softly, still calm. "I don't want Hai to know yet." A sentence, clear, direct, no hiding. Tieu San looked up, her eyes filled with questions. Not just confusion, but disbelief. "Why?" she asked. Not harsh, but straight. The man didn't answer immediately, didn't avoid, just looked at her. A silence passed. Then he spoke. Slowly, clearly. "I'm not ready, and I don't even know where to begin." A reason. Not detailed. Not complete. But enough to understand that behind it, there were many things still left unsaid. Tieu San fell silent. Not because she didn't understand, but precisely because she did. That she couldn't respond right away. What the man had just said was not unreasonable, not something impossible to accept, but it was something very difficult to take in a single moment. That truth was too sudden, too unexpected, and too sensitive to react to simply. She understood a part of what he was saying, understood his hesitation, understood his uncertainty, even understood why he chose to stand from a distance, to look, without stepping closer. But understanding did not mean acceptance, did not mean she could act like nothing had happened, did not mean she could ignore it. Then, as if recalling something important, something she needed to make clear, not to explain, but to place everything in its proper position, she spoke, her voice slower, unhurried, but clear. "Hai and I are not married yet." That sentence was not long, but enough to clarify that her relationship with Hai was not what the man had assumed. Not a complete family, not something officially defined, but simply a bond without formal status. The man paused, not because he didn't understand, but because he hadn't expected it. His eyes lingered on her face. A brief surprise, unhidden, yet not prolonged. Tieu San continued, without stopping, without leaving space between her words. "And Ivy is my child from before." As the sentence ended, the atmosphere between them shifted once again. No longer tense like before, no longer clearly defensive, but turning into something else. A kind of surprise. Not because it was hard to understand, but because it had never been in his initial thoughts. The man said nothing, did not ask again, did not react strongly, just nodded slightly. A very slow nod, as if absorbing, as if rearranging what he had just learned. A new piece of information, enough to change his perspective, enough to make everything no longer the same. Tieu San looked at him, no longer avoiding, no longer keeping distance as before, but with a gaze filled with thought. Then she spoke, slowly, clearly. "I think you should tell Hai the truth." That sentence carried no pressure, no criticism, just a thought, a direction she believed might be better, clearer, and would not make things more complicated later. But immediately, the man shook his head, without hesitation, without reconsideration. A response, very decisive. "Not yet." 3 words, short, but firm. No wavering. No doubt. As if he had thought about this for a very long time before saying it. Tieu San did not respond, did not argue immediately. But her eyes had changed. No longer just listening, but weighing. The man continued, his voice still calm, but this time carrying something else. A request. I only ask that you keep this secret for me. That sentence was not demanding, not forceful, but made the situation more difficult. Tieu San did not answer, did not nod, did not agree, but did not refuse either. She just stood there, between a choice, with no clear right or wrong. One side was the truth, something that sooner or later would have to be told. The other side was his request, a trust placed in her. One side was Hai, the person she did not want to hide things from, did not want to keep secrets from. The other side was the man before her, who had just appeared, but carried a truth that could change everything. She didn't know what she should do, not because she had no thoughts, but because any choice would bring consequences, and she was not ready to face that yet. That night, when she returned home, everything went back to normal, as if nothing.
Hello, chào mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình nha. Cái này thực ra thì mình đang làm, mình mới làm thôi, và trước là người khác làm thì mình mới làm kênh này nha mọi người. Hy vọng rằng mọi người sẽ yêu quý và ủng hộ cho kênh của mình nhiều hơn nhé. Cảm ơn mọi người rất là nhiều. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video sau nha. Bây giờ thì mình đang đặt tên cho video, sau đó thì mình sẽ làm ảnh bìa, ảnh đại diện cho video này, rồi sau đó đăng tải lên. Thì video hôm nay thì mình muốn truyền tải đến mọi người thông điệp là hãy trân trọng những gì mà mình đang có, bởi vì cũng như mọi người biết đấy, khi trước bố Hải đã từ bỏ mẹ con Hải để đi theo công danh sự nghiệp, và giờ ông quay về thì liệu rằng ông có thể tìm lại tất cả những thứ tình cảm mà ông đã bỏ qua, đã mất trong bao nhiêu năm qua hay không, thì mời mọi người đón xem tập sau để biết thêm chi tiết nhé. Chào tạm biệt mọi người.